This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski,
featuring retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer.
Not really a great look if you're trying to get yourself off the ground as an Innocence Project and the person you're picking for the headline of your Innocence Project really doesn't have a leg to stand on in terms of being innocent. I mean, what would the path be for a group like this if they're going to take this up? And granted, it's not the Innocence Project, it's the LA Innocence Project. Other than getting some notoriety out there, getting some attention for the group, I mean, where do you take something like this? The talking about the van and what possibly could have been in that van that was on fire on that Christmas morning. What would the next steps be in something like that?
Well, certainly, and I would hope that, of course, the prosecution team as well as the defense team, as you may recall, led by Mark Garagos, they're going to want to see if this red stain can be tested. Mm-hmm. Is it animal blood? Is it human blood? Is it paint? I mean, I don't know that anyone knows exactly what this stain is, but I think it's really important to get it tested. The issue, of course, is, has it even been preserved?
Yeah.
I've always said there's a big difference between DNA and blood. Blood is a vehicle that carries DNA, just like saliva, semen, a hair, all of that. But is that, stain, if it does end up being blood, is it so, old and not taken care of that it would even have any semblance of DNA remaining?
And where did this piece suddenly come from? Why is this a new piece of evidence in this case? Where has it been over the last 20 years that suddenly today we're talking about it?
Tony, that is the, $1 million question, right? All of a sudden this piece came up. I recently saw an interview on News Nation of the detective, the original detective that did all the work on the Peterson case. He said he'd never even heard of this van. And of course, he very much wants to see this tested to see if anything can be done with it, because I think he believes it will not prove to be Lacey Peterson's blood or Scott Peterson's blood. It will be unrelated to the case. But he had never even heard of it. But that makes sense when you're in a high crime area, that a case that no one that worked that, it was determined to be an arson. That arson squad never made a nexus either to the Lacey Peterson case. And everyone in Modesto knew that about the Lacey Peterson case. So I think that speaks volumes that there was no nexus made at the time. But it would appear that the LA Innocence Project, though, is looking for any possible dot to connect. And this is the one they're hanging their hat on.
I guess. I mean, yeah, with a lot of the fruit already picked off of the tree, maybe, here's one. Maybe we would think that's still kind of rotten. Because I guess on the surface, you think, oh, well, a vehicle on fire within somewhat of a proximity to where this crime took place. That's kind of a big red flag. But contextually, where the way you put it, it's not a good area. I'm guessing there's probably a lot of vehicle fires in this area. I don't have a statistic on that to prove that. But like you said, if it's not a great area, those sort of things do tend to happen quite frequently without a whole lot of connecting to other sources. When we're talking about the burglary, because I know that's another point on this that keeps getting kind of tied back in, I thought that the argument was settled on that years ago. And tell me if it was. The argument back then was that the Peterson home across the street on December 24th, same day Lacey disappeared, the defense argued that there was a burglary across the street and that maybe there was someone from that burglary that murdered Lacey Peterson. Maybe she saw them and they wanted to get rid of the person as a witness. However, later on, they did find those burglars and charge them, and it turned out that robbery allegedly occurred on December 26th. Is that still up for debate in some way, shape, or form?
Not that I'm aware of. That was put to bed, so it doesn't seem to be rearing its head again. It's the van, is my understanding, is their piece of evidence that they're looking to tie to the murder. And of course, that van, they've likely tied to somebody else. And so they're going to try to connect the dots that way. I will say this, though, that Mark Garagos has vehemently said that he thinks his client is innocent. But And I love Mark Garagos. He and I are partners on Cuomo.
Yeah.
But I will say that, I've never heard Mark Garagos say any of his clients were guilty. So, he's a great defense attorney.
Yeah.
He put up a great battle. But the jury spoke in this case,
Yep.
and the jury was adamant. He even received the death penalty, which we know got overturned. Honestly, my biggest question in this case that does really bother me. I don't care what side you're on, whether, obviously I believe he's guilty based on the evidence that I know and saw in that trial, and that he's properly in prison. But what does bother me was this jury issue.
Mm-hmm.
And a court looked at it and they said, listen, we're going to vacate his sentence regarding the death penalty and give him life because of the juror.
Mm-hmm.
And inappropriate, I guess, actions on behalf of the juror, and that nothing was done. Basically, they called it an error by the trial court related to this juror. Now, that kind of bothers me because, Tony, either the conviction's good and was worth the death penalty, or the conviction wasn't good and he shouldn't be in jail for life. So that piece does bother me a little bit, but it's done. There's nothing that can be done. All his appeals are exhausted unless there would be some revelation regarding, other evidence.
If this van comes back, or that red color on that fabric does turn out to be blood of one of the two, I think you got a whole new open case here. But if it turns out to be nothing related, probably back at square one, and LA Innocence Project needs to find somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. They need to bark up another tree, but boy, has this gotten them so much recognition, even though really everybody thinks it's the Innocence Project.
And it's not. It's an optical illusion, so to speak.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free,
so you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.